Hello, and welcome to another American Photo Treks post-processing video. And today we're going to be post-processing a Milky Way image that we took while we were at the Pueblo Reservoir this last weekend. And as always, we're going to actually process a picture that we took at the workshop, so you can follow along and do it just the exact same way I do if you like, or add your own touches there. And just and if this is the first time you've ever watched one of these, let me just familiarize you. This is me, I'm David. And every time I touch a key or anything, the keystroke that I'm doing pops up right here. Otherwise, you can follow along with me right here. I'll be starting off in Adobe Bridge. Then we'll go into Adobe Camera Raw, where I'll do most of my processing. And Adobe Camera Raw has the exact same editing features as Lightroom, so you can follow along like that. And then I'll probably go into Photoshop just a little bit, maybe do a couple tweaks here and there depending on how things come out. Now, we're going to create a panorama. If you'll remember, while we were at the workshop, I told you to take your picture and then pan up, pan up, pan up. And that was because the Milky Way, during the time of year that we're photographing it, just shoots straight up into the sky. So to capture it and still make it a somewhat interesting photograph, I like to create a panorama. So that's what we're going to do here. And I think I'm going to use this picture right here. These are ones I took in order. And I'll take this guy right here. And I'll just take them all. What the heck? There we go. We've got 5 images. And I'll double click them, and that will open them up into Adobe Camera Raw. It's good to have too many pictures overlapping. Not good to not have enough. If you don't have enough, there's not much you can do. I see that. Just a second here. Now you can't see me. And cancel that for a second. And I'm gonna Photoshop wants to sell me something, and I'll let him talk me into that later. And I'll open this right here, and then we'll try this again with Bridge. Here we go. Double click and open them right up. Alright, so I'm going to edit all of these the exact same way, and in order to do that I click on this little square right here and I say select all. And you know what, I'm going to choose this image to be the image that I work with, because in that way I can see a little bit of everything, and then go back and say select all. And I always start off with the white balance. I always hit auto just to kind of see what the camera thinks I ought to do. You never know. It makes good suggestions sometimes. And I actually do kind of like this, but I might like just a little bit bluer sky, just a tad bit. It can be pretty with just a little bit bluer sky. Let's go right about there. And as you see, that'll make the same adjustment to all of those. And this is one place where you can be a little creative. You know, some people like different color skies. I've seen purple skies. I've seen all kinds of different, black skies, darker blue, green. I like blue because I kind of think that if you're lighting up the sky, then it turns blue like it does in the daytime, and so it looks a little bit more realistic to me. But that's kind of one place where you can be a little creative. I guess space is technically black, but that's kind of boring. But however, this is one place where you can be a little creative. And I do sometimes push this over just a tad to give it some, a nice warmer, a little prettier color. So that's pretty typical for me with these shots. Then I'll start off by hitting auto and on my sliders here, and it just usually gives me a place to start. It's never where I'm really going to end up. And my camera and lens really brought a lot of light in, so I actually need to probably turn it down just a little bit. Contrast is usually your friend. Highlights, we got this working against us here, but we don't want to dull the stars too much, so I'll bring it down a little bit. Shadows, Yeah, we probably want to see these, and if we've got that information, let's see them. We can always deal with it later, but let's not get rid of it. Whites are our stars. We want those to look nice, and blacks are about neutral. Clarity is almost always your friend when processing Milky Way images, and you always like a little vibrance too. And I'm going to show you how to make the Milky Way pop, but first, I'm going to tell you what, I don't know what's going on here. Let's sync all, let's make sure everything's synced, because that is a super blue sky down here, 3150, and I don't know if I like it that blue. Let's come here, select all again. Maybe we can come down just a tad, more like about what I usually do, more like about, yeah, like 3450. There we go. So that's about right. So it looks like what's going to happen is it's going to get bluer as we go up in the sky. All right, select all. So we're making universal changes here. Sharpening. You can do this before or after. A lot of people do it after, but you don't want to sharpen Milky Way images too much. You know, you got to worry about grain. Take it about 60. Take it to usually 1.8 as far as the radius, and then here's the trick to sharpening. You hold down the Alt key, you move the mask over, and you only apply the sharpening to where you want it to be. Some people's images look over sharpened, and it's not because they push those sliders too far, it's because they applied the sharpening to everything. Well, really you just want the sharpening in most cases on your edges. So that's what we did, and you can kind of see we've got a little bit, you know, everything's a little sharper, a little clearer now. I used ISO 4000 here, and you know, I'm just not seeing a whole lot of noise. I'm just not going to mess with noise reduction on this. So now I'm going to go over to my lens profile, and I'm going to show you guys a trick. Now I was using the Rokinon 24mm lens. That's a manual lens, and Adobe does not have a profile for manual lenses like that. But if I go down to Sony, and I shoot Sony, and I pick a 24mm Sony lens, watch what happens. Boom. It corrected the distortion and just about all of the vignetting, even though it didn't have this specific lens. And it did this to all of my images, and that's going to be helpful when I go to put this together. All right. And there's a real cool thing called dehaze here, but I'm not going to use it just yet. I'm going to wait till I stitch everything together. So now we're just going to open the images in Photoshop. And it takes a second to open them. We got a lot of things going on. We got the video. And this is kind of what happens when you get a little movement. Boom, there's the Milky Way going up in the sky, up, up, all the way up. So now to merge them in a panorama, and Adobe does a pretty darn good job of this. I go File, Automate, Photo Merge. Say Add Open Files. For Milky Way shots, not sure why, but this new collage feature just works best. I don't say content aware, fill the transparent areas. I'm on a tripod. It's a 3-axis tripod. I'm moving it straight up, and if there is any of that filling transparent areas that needs to be done, I'll do that myself. I'm not going to ask that to do it. So now I'm going to say I've got my files added, and I'm going to say OK, and the magic starts happening. And a lot of you guys I saw were a lot more creative with what's in the foreground than I'm being here. And I just wanted to get a real good Milky Way image to show you how to process it. I saw some people using sunflowers. That was just beautiful. I saw some people, and then doing some light painting. A lot of people using the very interesting driftwood. Really like that. You guys were just so creative, so smart, and I can't wait to see your images. This is just for demonstration purposes. So there we go. It put it all together. I know it looks like they're puzzle pieces and stuff like this right now, and but all I have to do is hit Layer, Flatten, and all that goes away. And now I'm going to see. I'm just gonna, I think I'll just go freestyle here. Put this together. And I'm gonna crop it and put it like this. And that looks good. Hit enter. And there's my image. And obviously I don't think we needed anywhere near 5 images to create this. But it's better to have too much overlap than not enough. And here we can even see some of the reflection down here. You can see the Milky Way going up into the sky. I don't know if we got something weird going on here or not. Not sure. We'll take a look at that in a minute. Now a lot of times I'll close out the images I use to make my panorama, just because, you know, why have that memory being taken up when I'm doing these other things. So first stop for me is going to be this very cool thing that they've added to Adobe recently, where you can go right back into the camera raw filter. And now that I've got my image put together, I'm going to do that filter, camera raw filter, and right back into there. And the reason I'm doing this is because I like the brush right here. And I've got a brush right here, and I'm with this brush, I'm going to brush in some adjustments, a little bit of contrast, a lot of saturation, a little bit of clarity. Clarity is definitely your friend. And I'm going to use this brush to paint the Milky Way. Right there you see how that's making the Milky Way pop right there, which is what we want to do. And I'm going to paint it a little bit down here too, because we want our reflection to pop in the picture as well. Now I've got that. Now remember, I told you there was a very cool tool that they've recently added to a bridge that really helps with the Milky Way. It's over in the effects panel, and it's in the effects panel of Lightroom as well. It's this new dehaze filter. And watch the magic as I move this dehaze filter over. Look at what it's doing to my Milky Way. Everything you want to do in one fell swoop. And I am not liking this blue at all. But so good thing I can always go back here, change my temperature again. I like a little blue, not like that much blue. And now that I have dehazed it and I've created my panorama, I can turn down my exposure a little bit. If your images that you're creating your panorama from are too dark, Adobe is going to have a real hard time putting the panorama together. So when it comes time to put my panorama together, I'd rather have my images be a little bit overexposed, because I can always bring them back in here and turn it down just a little bit. And that's what I've done here. So there we go. That's our basic image of the Milky Way. And we look at this is real interesting. We're back into now Adobe, and real interesting this this right here, this light pollution here almost looks like a setting sun or something. Very kind of interesting. Now take a look at this and see what we can do to make the whole thing pop even more. Another favorite of mine with the Milky Way is levels. And almost always you're all the way over here, and I'll bring that down. It's just a more natural looking, and maybe bring this right to where we're just within our histogram, then bring the midtones down. And I don't know if I like that or not, because man, it is really blowing this out, isn't it? And I don't want that. So maybe more about like that. Okay, and a lot of the core here had disappeared by the time that stupid cloud disappeared, but we still do have a lot of the cloud. We still got a lot of the information there, so we're still kind of okay. I'm a little bit worried about my reflection, but that's about right for what we got here. And let's see. Now, one of my favorite little things is I use NIK effects tools. I really enjoy them, like a lot of the things they do. And I'm going to open Color Effects Pro here just for a second. And this sounds strange, but I'm going to hit the skylight filter, and it came up as a default there. And look what that does. It adds just a little bit of color to everything. It doesn't need to be too strong. And in my opinion, just makes everything just a little bit prettier and more interesting. So I'm going to add that. I always take a look at tonal contrast. And again, it just adds a little extra pop, especially to the Milky Way and through there. You've got to be careful with tonal contrast though, because if you're using an older sensor or one that isn't quite as sensitive, you're going to hit total contrast and you're just instantly going to ruin your picture. You just are. And I'm going to turn up my skylight filter here just a bit. In fact, I'm turning it up too much because I now know that when I go back, I've created a layer in Adobe, and I know that I'm going to turn it down. And so I go over to my layer here, and you can change the opacity of your layer with this slider right here. See where I click right there? And I'm going to turn it down because I don't want that much. There's the full. I don't want quite that much of a tonal contrast effect. I mean, it's pretty cool, but you get too much and it's going to be a little grainy. So that's what I got right there. And when I turn it down, I know I'm also turning down my skylight filter effect. And I do want those colors. So there we can see what we've added right there. We got a little bit of reflection right here. And I could keep the layer, but sometimes I'm just a neat freak, so I'll flatten it. And now I'm going to go into the other NIK filter called Vivesa 2. I'm going to click that right there. And I'm going to add a control point down here because I would like to lighten my lake a little bit. Maybe just a little bit right there. And you see what that does? Basically, I'm just creating a control point there. And I'm just brightening my lake just a little bit. And I'm going to add a little structure to the lake so I can see the reflection maybe just a little bit better. I don't know. Where you put that point means a lot. And some contrast. And maybe lose a little shadow. Right about like that. Then I'll duplicate and duplicate again. Just adding a little bit more reflection there in the water. And another thing I can do with my control points right here is I can bring them right to the edge of the Milky Way, open this up, and if I turn down the brightness right next to the Milky Way a little bit, it actually makes the Milky Way pop. See that? I don't go all the way into the Milky Way, just go over there, turn down the brightness just on the edges, and it makes my Milky Way pop a little bit more. And then if I'd still like a little bit more color in the colorful part of my Milky Way, I can do a special little adjustment right there and just see what happens when I turn up the saturation. You don't want to do any of these too much because it'll really just look weird. And maybe a little bit of the warmth. There we go. I'm going to duplicate that and maybe move it up a little bit into the Milky Way. And as you can see, the core is almost always where you get the majority of your colors and definition. I'm noticing that our light pollution did kick out a little bit of the coolness of the Milky Way. And I'm going to turn down the brightness on our light pollution just a tad. But you can't do it too much because then it's going to look really weird and unnatural. But if you can turn it down a little bit. And there we go, right about there. Now we can really start to see our Milky Way. That light pollution was difficult there from, imagine that's got to be Pueblo, right? Well, no, Pueblo would be over here, so I'm not sure where that's from, but boy, it's a lot of light pollution. And so we'll open this back up. And again, we've created a layer here. And normally people would keep all these layers because, you know, if you'd ever want to do adjustments to this in the future, then you'd want to, you know, it'd be a lot easier if you kept these layers and you could just adjust the opacity, delete the layer, whatever you wanted to do. But just for demonstration purposes, it's so much easier just to flatten things out as we go. And again, if we don't like how much we've adjusted things, and you know what, I don't like quite how much I've done in certain areas here, you can turn down the opacity. That's what I'm doing here. So this is the change we made with Vivesa. And that's essentially, I will flatten this. And that's essentially it as far as just generally making your Milky Way image pop and come alive. And doggone it, that cloud stayed around for so long that we lost a lot of the core, but we still can clearly see the Milky Way. We still got a little bit of reflection there in the lake. And some of you guys had much better angles on this. And we also had, I know I wasn't shooting, I was helping everybody else out. But there were some real interesting shots earlier in the evening when we could see the core above that cloud before it came rolling in. And I'm dying to see those images too. So please, by all means, you know, get those processed and let's post those to the meetup page because I really want to see them. So if I went too fast, just, you know, that's a great thing about video. You can just slow it down, pause it, and then, you know, go back and, you know, see exactly what I did. And by all means, if you've got questions, shoot me an email, shoot a message on Meetup, and I'll do my best to help you out. Thank you very much for coming to our American Photo Trucks adventure. It was a blast, as always. We got just wonderful guests, and have a great week.